So, social learning. Social learning. Wait for everyone to be ready. Okay. Okay, so first we're going to start out talking about social learning. A little bit of a kind of a case study with these Japanese macaques. So in the 1950s, researchers observed a Japanese macaque, these are monkeys, watching sweet potatoes. So the behavior itself is actually adapted because the food on the beach is covered in sand, and watching the potatoes, monkeys don't want to eat the sand, not necessarily good for them. The behavior was adapted. And other macaques tend to choose to begin to engage in the watching behavior as well. So how do these monkeys acquire this behavior? And it's thought that it might have been through social learning or imitation specifically. So one monkey watches, another monkey watches the potato, and they do it. They socially learn the information. There are also some examples of that are kind of similar. With chimps being seen to wash clothes or wash their hands with soap, I should say, not clothes. We talked about that a bit. But the thought is one individual observes another individual engaging in this type of behavior, and then they socially learn the information. They learned it from another individual here. Okay. So here we can see an example where you can actually see the behavior bring the potato to the water between water, sand and dirt off. In hands or they are everywhere. You don't see that they're actually peeling the potato that we just have trying to get the dirt off. That's one example, potentially thought to be learned through social learning. So why is learning from others important? Why is social learning important? Okay. One thought is that related to phenotypic plasticity. Basically, that learning from others is adapted in unpredictable or changing conditions. So when an environment is very unpredictable, highly unpredictable, always changing, it might be helpful to see what other members of your group are doing. They may have found a strategy to solve a problem that is more useful than the one you come up with on your own. You can contrast social learning with asocial learning, so not social learning, learning on your own. when you're thinking about whether you socially learn or not, it is most adaptive to be able to discriminate between situations. Like social learning is useful and asocial learning. So there is cost associated with social learning. Cost associated with just about everything, of course. But the costs might be different in different situations. Okay. So related to this idea that it's adaptive to discriminate when social learning is useful or not, the pickleback fish, re-spined picklebacks generally do not use social learning. But the related 9 spine picklebacks do, and they can switch. They can use social learning or asocial learning depending on the environment. Whichever one is most useful. So I'm mentioning that there's cost associated with social learning. So when is it useful to use social learning? So if an established behavior becomes unproductive, so the strategy that you have, or the way to solve problems, stop working, an established behavior has become unproductive, then maybe you should switch to talking to another individual. It would also be beneficial to use social learning when asocial learning, for some reasons, is very costly. It's also quite important to engage in social learning with other individuals that are the same environment as you. Yeah, different environments with different problems, then it wouldn't really make sense to engage in social learning. Okay, so these are the 3 criteria for when to use social learning. The other thought is who is best to learn from? So who you are copying is important. And it's most effective to learn from individuals who are respectful. That makes sense, right? You don't want to copy the behavior or imitate the behavior of an individual who is not successful. Makes sense? Who you are copying is important. And related to this idea of who you become is conformity, right? Not just humans will conform. We've found evidence in a number of species that the probability of copying the behavior goes up the more other individuals are engaging in that behavior. For example, highlighted in your textbook too, that chimpanzees are more likely to copy a behavior done by 3 individuals, 3 different fish. I think the figure in the textbook is very bad. I don't know what it's trying to show, but it is explained in the textbook. Chimpanzees are more likely to copy a behavior done by 3 individuals than a behavior done 3 times by the same individual. So that's another example of conforming. So a lot of members of your group are engaging in a particular behavior probably okay. A large part of this topic, this lecture, and the textbook has to go through different kinds of social learning. So I would call it a taxonomy of social learning. It's a way of dividing things up, dividing different kinds of social learning. And here they all are. Okay. The textbook goes through these: enhancement, observational conditioning, emulation, mimicry, and imitation. And these are all kinds of different parts, different aspects of social learning. Different researchers of social learning may define different types of social learning observed. The same type of social learning observed, they might use different definitions. Okay, so we can get a little muddy. But these are the 5 different kinds of social learning that are generally accepted. So it's important to know what each of them are. Okay. If you find this a really dry, but that's okay. It's important to know the way to categorize information. Okay. So enhancement. Let's talk about enhancement. So how is enhancement defined? Well, we can think about the example that we talked about at the beginning of the course with Lucas bird. Everyone Google birds naming tips. Please add bird and the word. Just saying. Next shot. Okay. So blue tip. Open bottle of milk. Right? Beginning. They peel the foil off of these bottles, and then they eat the cream on the top, right? And some people thought that this might have been due to social learning. So the birds might have been observing other members of their species, opening those bottles, and then they did it as well. In an experiment done in the lab, and look at what's going on here, in social learning, they did the experiment with chickadees. Our friends chickadees. Once again, they're really great in captivity, okay? They're very, what's the word? We talk about They do well in captivity. So they're often used in experiments for those reasons. Okay. So in one particular example, they put chickadees into the lab to see if the chickadees could also engage in this behavior and opening a container for a reward prize. Okay. And if there was any social learning involved. And what they found, that it certainly did help witnessing others. They opened those containers, but the chickadees didn't actually need to witness others opening the bottles. They just needed evidence of other birds opening the bottles. So if they just showed the birds a bottle that had been opened by another bird, they didn't even have to see another bird engaging in the behavior, just seeing it open. That made it more likely for them to engage in the same behavior. For them to also feel bad. I think in this experiment we have containers that were being opened, but it's the same idea. The same idea. Okay. So we could describe this behavior with a feed. Or one way to explain this kind of social learning is that it can be facilitated by having attention drawn. In this case, it's a stimulus. But it could also be a locale, which is a located bubble. Okay. So in the case of the chickadees, meaning those open containers, this would be an example of stimulus enhancement. Basically bringing attention to a stimulus. Whereas multiple enhancement would be bringing attention to a location. That's categorized as image. Two different kinds, local and state. Okay. Observational conditioning, another kind of social learning. Kind of like conditioning in that there is a stimulus and a reward. But here is acquiring that association between stimulus and reward by watching another individual experience that reward. One example used to talk about observational conditioning is learning to avoid predators. So, in some species of birds, naive birds have to learn about what's a predator and what's not. So they watch the behavior of other members of their species, what birds they engage in mobbing. So mobbing would be basically a group of birds they attack the bird, the predator, at once. They'll use many vocalizations, it's very loud when they're doing this, but they're all attacking the predator, mobbing behavior. Okay. So an example of this, observational conditioning using the idea of mobbing behavior on birds. Okay, bird. And they show this bird. Well, basically they have it set up where they have birds in a cage. And they're taking recordings. And then they show this bird, the predator, and the capture of the predator. Kind of like what we just talked about with the chicken. Okay? And then, this is a bird that has experience with predators. Okay? So he knows that that is a predator. I'm going to engage in that mobbing with mob calls. The bird can't really mob or get caged, but it'll certainly engage in the call. If you have a naive bird, so a bird that doesn't know what its predator wants, and in this setup, this experimental setup, this naive bird can see what the experienced bird is doing. Okay? So this guy can see this. But this experienced bird cannot see this predator. So what it sees is the experienced bird engaging in mob behavior, producing mob calls. And that makes the bird also engage in mob behavior. Instead of seeing a mounted bird, predator, the bird sees a water bottle. What ends up happening when you show this naive bird, after it's experienced the situation, the water bottle, it starts to produce mob calls towards the water bottle. So there's some learning happening here, right? It's not an innate ability because there's no way to hear a water bottle. Bird. So that's an example of observational conditioning. Alright, another kind of social learning is emulation, which can be defined as attending to the object or the environment. There are three variants of emulation. Here they all are: coordinates learning, object movement reenactment, and state emulation. So coordinates learning is a lot more of learning that instead of learning how. So it's the process of learning about the properties of objects, relationships between objects. Some people say, well, coordinates learning is just the same as stimulus enhancement, but others say it's different due to attention to stimulus. Yeah, I find this stuff very dry. Okay, the other kind is there's object movement reenacted, learning how objects move, and there's end state emulation, which is learning the end results. Not going to test if you have the objects. Alright, imagery. Tending to an individual. Basically, observers are tending to the individual demonstrator. And here the distinction is that you're learning about the actual actions that are taking place without understanding objects or an end state. So an end state could be those open containers. That's an end state. So here we'd be learning about opening the container rather than really having any understanding of the object or the end state. We're just learning about the opening. So really it's more about attending to an individual than the object or the end state. Imitation, on the other hand, is an awareness of. So that's copying behavior that you see occurring and recognizing the end state. Recognizing that it's so it is possible to imitate watching behavior, opening container, without actually knowing the properties of the container, just knowing we need to copy that behavior. And maybe not actually knowing anything about the physical properties. But it can be possible to design experiments that differentiate between understanding the properties of opening that container or not. Okay. You go backward. Step through that a little bit. It's important to know that there are different types of social learning, and know kind of broadly what each of them means. Okay? You should know the difference between local enhancement and stimulus enhancement. You know a little bit more in detail, if we have an example. Great. Emulation, I find pretty getting kind of pedantic for me. You know generally that it's about attending to objects, okay? But I wouldn't worry too much about knowing about these 3 times. Talking about when I say knowing, I'm talking about for your exam of that here. Okay. Alright. In mimicry, again, mimicry and imitation is no imitation yet. You're not going to get short answer questions. Okay? Little tip. If your instructor ever says they're not very interested in something, which usually they don't, probably shouldn't say that, but that probably means you won't get tested on it. Okay? Little tip. Alright. Okay, let's talk about some different examples of social learning. So social learning when it comes to food preferences. Animals like rats, they're omnivores. Eat all whole sort of different things, but they have to be worried about getting sick or being poisoned, right? So it's helpful to learn what other rats are eating and not got sick. Okay. So social learning with food preferences does end up happening in rats. Okay. So in an experiment, looking at social learning, food preferences in rats, there's a demonstrator rat that's given a flavored food, all foods flavored. Has a specific flavor. And then plays back to the stage. So hasn't been given anything. And then the observer is given choices between foods. And the observer chooses a flavor food that tastes. So even though it's potentially a novel food source, through social learning, they can see, okay, I can eat that food. They can eat my pig made a mistake and they clearly didn't eat it. Now how do they know that it's food? The rats have to be able to smell the food and smell the breath of the other rats. So rats frequently sniff each other's mouths to learn about what they've been eating. It's a natural behavior to engage in environment. It makes a lot of sense. Like I said, rats eat just about everything, but they can't vomit. That's something I left out. So rats can't throw up. So they'll get food sick when they eat something like that. So they really have to learn what foods are safe and what are not. And if they can learn that by smelling each other, that's very, very useful. Going to die. For our friends who are not here today. If you want to listen later. My power cord that frightens me is starting to break. I really should get a new one. Once I had a power cord for my iPhone that I was woken up and like I was just going to sleep and my power cord was like starting to catch on fire. So that's a little tip to not use sprayed power cords. Clearly I have not learned my own lesson and I am using one that's a bit sprayed. But I'm very aware that it's sprayed. I wouldn't leave it on overnight. Okay. Alright, all set up. Okay, so when we're talking about food preferences, then, do all species learn food preferences socially? Probably yes, probably not. Okay, so golden hamsters, we talked a bit about golden hamsters before. These are species who could smell their genetic mothers, had a preference for their genetic mothers. We talked about them then. So golden hamsters show a preference for foods that were eaten by their mother. But as they age, when they become adults, they don't actually show food preferences for food eaten by other individuals. Okay, so if their mother ate something, these guys are mom and boys. Once they grow to adults, they don't have these food preferences. And before they're adults as well, they won't really have food preferences to other individuals. But this makes sense, because bull hamsters are solitary in adulthood. They don't live socially. So social learning at the adult phase of life would provide an advantage. And by that time, they're separated from their mothers as well. They go off and do their own thing. So it makes sense that when they are pups, they have preferences for foods that were eaten by their mothers, but then when they're adults, they don't have the same food preferences from other individuals. Because they don't live socially. So why would they socially learn? And this can be seen as an ontogenic adaptation. Ontogeny means development. Developmental adaptation. Changes throughout their life. Okay, so we talked a bit about bird song. We'll talk a bit about song learning. So bird song they are species-typical vocalizations produced through bass. We already talked about this, right? And we know that songs are learned from their parents and tutors. Some of the evidence that we know that some social learning is happening comes from work done on white-crowned sparrows, showing that they actually have different dialects of song. So all the same species, but in different geographical locations, will have slight variances in how they sing. Just like we have different dialects of speaking, depending on what geographic region you're in. Someone from Newfoundland, for example, has a much different accent than someone from northern Ontario. Those are dialects, right? But you're still speaking the same language, you can still understand each other. We know that white-crowned sparrows is able, and other birds too, but the first work on this is done with white-crowned sparrows that have these different dialects. So that shows that some aspect of social learning must be happening. It's not just a song that's innate, it doesn't just show up. There's some aspect of learning happening. It is still species specific though. So there is an innate mechanism of some kind for recognizing a species specific song. So the songs of the white-crowned sparrow will just completely change if you're hearing the song of a different species. Right? There are some aspects of the song that stay the same. Okay, so some parts of the song are learned, and other parts are kind of more ingrained. Okay. So song development, birds, again, this is something that's studied quite a bit. And through the stages of development of song, there's some parallels with how language develops in people. So the first stage is sub-song, and this is kind of analogous to human babbling. So babies babbling, they do much phonemes, right? They produce many different kinds of sounds, but it doesn't have any meaning to it, right? And birds do engage in this kind of babbling, sub-song. So they're producing the right sounds, but they're kind of practicing phonemes, right? So that's the first stage. And then, over time, through this development, the song enters the plastic song stage, So here there are now species-specific notes and song elements, but it's not quite yet fully formed. And then you get a crystallized song. This is when you have a fully developed species-specific song that is similar to a tutor. So a tutor could be a parrot, but it could also be a conspecific. That is not a parrot. And in birds, something that's studied quite a bit, neurologically, actually, in the bird brain, is the song control system. So what you're looking at actually is a sagittal view, so from this way, of the bird's brain. And some of these structures involved in the song control system in birds. Some of those important structures are area X, RA. The HBC, though, is the one you should try to remember. It was once called the higher vocal center, but it got renamed. Here's HBC. That's its proper name. It's not an acronym. It's just called HBC. HBC is often larger in male birds than female birds because male birds are singing more often than female birds are. But quite a bit of research on the song control system. So we have an actual, this is a mechanism. While thinking about Timberman's questions, this is a mechanism of bird song. Different areas, different structures in the brain, sending signals out to the syrinx. We talked a bit about the syrinx earlier. And also the respiratory muscles to produce bird song. If these structures are lesioned, it can have significant effects on birds. Okay. Bird song over time. So there's some evidence to show that surveillance sparrows, the song itself has stayed the same over the years. It's actually slowly kind of changed. Just like human language can kind of change over time. Differences, right? Again, it's not exactly the same language and bird song, of course. But song in these birds has actually changed over time. So there are different parts of the song. Just like we looked at the different parts of the chickadee calls. But there's two parts here we'll talk about. The trill and the buzz. And the trill at the end of the Savannah sparrow song seems to be a sexually selective trait. It seems to change over time. That's the part of the song that's changed over time. The buzz that occurs before the trill doesn't change. It remains unchanged over time. So different aspects, different parts of the song change while others just stay the same. And again, this is thought to be showing that parts of the song are socially learned and other parts are inflexible. So they'll stay the same. Okay, so when we're talking about all those taxonomies and social learning, that taxonomy and social learning, all the different ways you can categorize it, where does song learning fit into that taxonomy? It's definitely social learning, right? They're learning from other members of their own species, how to sing. And if they don't get that learning, their songs don't sound quite right. So some aspects of the song might show up. No problem. Those innate parts of the song, perhaps. But the socially learned ones would be quite impoverished, right? So, learning bird song, definitely social learning. But is it the same as other types of social learning? Some researchers have argued that it's just a kind of end state learning, so the birds are copying the songs of others. But others have argued that it's its own kind of social learning. It's not separate, it's special. And it's special for two reasons. For one, birdsong builds on species typical behavior, is highly constrained. You can't learn the song of another species. And the other thing is that the vocal learner actually gets feedback from their own behavior. So they can learn from their own singing. They can learn more information from producing their own song. That's quite different from the types of learning that we talk about. Social learning. Okay. Right. A lot of work on this, on bird song learning, occurs right here at Western, and the advanced facility for education. So if you're not familiar, you might not be because it's kind of tucked away. It's a building near Saugeen, actually. It's kind of behind support services. They do a lot of work on birds, and a lot of the work that's done, this is where I worked, this is where I did my PhD and my master's. But a lot of the work there is done on song learning. If you're interested about that, you can go to birds.uwo. Okay. Alright, and we're going to end off. Oh. Yeah. It doesn't have to be. Definitely for song learning that we just talked about, it has to be a young individual. But social learning can happen at any stage. Yeah, good question. Okay. We're going to end off here on a discussion of social learning with do animals teach? So it's one thing to just observe an individual engaging in a behavior and copying it or learning about the end state of the object or so on and so forth. But is there capacity for an animal to actually teach? Non-human animals. I'm doing that right now. I'm an animal. Okay, but do non-human animals teach? Okay. So here are 3 criteria to demonstrate that an animal is teaching. So these are the 3 criteria. The first is the behavior has to be modified in front of a naive individual in a manner that increases the chance of learning for that individual who is learning. That's one. The second is that it actually incurs a cost to myself. It is cost to teach, right? It is. I'm telling you. Still worth it though. Okay. And the third thing is that there has to be a cause for the student to have learned something more rapidly than would have occurred otherwise. Right. These are conditions for teaching to occur. Okay. Alright. So one example of teaching can be seen in meerkats. Let's watch a quick video about that.
The Phoenix meerkats aren't known to their grades, but they happen to be very good teachers. It's usually assumed that teaching requires high levels of intelligence, but researchers are starting to think otherwise. A young meerkat will be presented with a dead scorpion for dinner, but when it gets a bit older, an adult is presented with a live scorpion whose head is staying removed. The pup can then learn how to kill the scorpion without the risk of getting stung. Although it may seem like the adult is recognizing the pup's story experience, researchers are actually finding that they're a lot less clever. Meerkats are simply responding to changes in their pup's begging flow. When a young meerkat becomes self-sufficient, adults can all spend longer foraging, so it benefits the whole group. In this case, teaching is based on instinct rather than complex thought.
So that is in one of these boxes in your textbook. So meerkats. Okay, so does this behavior meet our definition of teaching that we just outlined? It certainly facilitates learning, right? The meerkats are helping the learning take place, but is it teaching? So this is a quote from your textbook. So some examples of animal teaching another animal, may fit this current operational definition. Okay. So that was an operational definition. Really, the definition may need to be kind of modified to more accurately define what we know about human teaching as a different system. So if we go back, that behavior kind of fits all these boxes, right? But the experimenters doing that experiment are saying it's really just a change in response to begging calls. Okay. So it might fit this definition. But the definition might need to be modified a bit more. Okay. And that's where we're going to end today. So thanks for coming, and I'll see you guys next week for our last formal